I'm filming.
In the last scene of the film, when you're walking away from the performance of Allegiance, what were you hoping Brad would say to you about your performance?
Well, I was expecting support. But
You haven't learned your lesson, have you?
No. 27 years and I still haven't learned. I've got a lot of learning to do.
Brad, couldn't you have said what a terrific job he had done in that show?
Obviously, with 2020 hindsight, I didn't say the right thing. That's the problem of having Jennifer Crute and her film crew spend hundreds of hours with us over a 3-year period. I knew that at the final cut, Jennifer would remove anything that was derogatory toward me. Was I ever wrong?
Audience, we are going to give you an opportunity to speak to the filmmakers, to Brad and to George. There are microphones in the audience. All you have to do is indicate that you'd like to ask a question. I'm going to ask you to please ask a question with a very short preamble. Keep the preamble to a minimum, get right to the question, and then we'll be able to get as many questions as possible. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation on the stage too, so please join in. And I just, there's that scene at the beginning of the film where the first face we see is Howard Stern. And there's something about your relationship with Howard that opens you up. Can you describe that for us a little bit, George?
Well, I was very apprehensive at first because of his reputation. Brad, that
I have to get involved, don't I?
you know who's the manager in our family. And I've become dependent on that managing, so I don't know what will happen when one of us aren't with each other anymore. Feeling mortality. Howard Stern.
Yes.
Very alive with it. Brad was the Howard Stern listener, and when we got the invitation, I said we'd like to think about it, and we talked it over, and we realized he was offering us a great opportunity to carry out our mission of social justice. But beyond that, I discovered him to be a very bold and honest man. He will stand up, and we talk about the freedom of speech. He really utilizes the freedom of speech, sometimes whimsically.
Right.
But other times, he stood up and criticized George Bush for plunging us into a war in Iraq and cutting taxes.
But did you know that you were not going to put up any boundaries at all about what Howard could ask you or talk about? Did you know that you were going to reveal as much about yourself and Brad on that show as you do?
No, you are put in that situation. And Howard is, as I said, he'll try to get at the truth this way, if not this way, if not this way. Then he'll, and you want to avoid this kind of thing. So you volunteer it before he puts you in a spot.
I know a lot about my friends' sex lives, but I know more about Brad's sex life than I know about my friends' sex lives. And that's because you went on Howard Stern and talked about it in detail.
And when I got home, I paid the price for it.
Well, what was it like for you to listen to that unfold on the radio, Brad?
I don't know. It's just something that I don't like to talk about.
See, he keeps it privacy.
Oh,
But I'm glad George does it. I'm glad he does the Howard Stern show.
it's the honesty. It's this idea that you are not going to put any boundaries at all that fits into you as an activist as well.
That's right. You want to be forthright, and when you're doing the Howard Stern show, you know that's part of the game. And so when those questions are asked, you want to volunteer it before he yanks it out of you in a much more embarrassing way. Howard is an amazing guy, and I would vote for him for president.
I've seen this film twice now, and it's such a, every time I see it, I'm amazed by the construction of the narratives, the way that you put it all together, the number of insights that you're able to get from all of the different voices in the film. And the message of George's life, which is just so extraordinary and so very, very positive. And, you know, George, you're without bitterness, you have no negativity, you have this enormous generosity, and you really don't like Bill Shatner.
You know, in life you learn that there are many different kinds of people, and Bill is a certain kind of person, and you just don't let that get you down. You recognize him for what he is, and you move on. You carry on.
And Jennifer, when you spent time with Shatner, did you get the sense that he was genuine when he talked about the things that he talked about?
That's a little bit hard to tell, but I mean, I had a great 10-minute conversation with Shatner. I'm so glad that he did agree to talk to me.
We had to negotiate
there
with
was
him.
some negotiations, actually, behind the scenes. And, you know, I think I was saying, I've always been, in Star Trek, a big fan of Spock, Leonard Nimoy, and so I was very excited to meet him, and I thought, ooh, Shatner I was a little nervous about, I know there's this relationship, but, you know, he's over 80 years old, and he just came into the room, and he just, like, the energy just knocked me off my chair. It was like, he's got so much assertive energy, so, you know, and very intimidating person to face in a lot of ways. But we had a great conversation, and I appreciate his participating, being a good sport.
Audience, would you like to start asking some questions? Do we have a question in the audience? Yes? Tom, hi, go ahead, please. Hello. Hi.
Sorry, thank you. I'm wondering if you feel that you've had the success you desired in your activism towards acceptance of gay, lesbian rights, and if not, what more do you think is in you to accomplish that?
We've made extraordinary advances. I mean, just last year, the Supreme Court of the United States came down with rulings which made marriage equality legal in 1/3 of the country, plus the national capital, Washington, D.C. Another third had their amendment banning marriage equality to their constitution ruled unconstitutional, and the other third is getting suits so that they'll have to go to court. So, you know, we've got 1/3 equality and 2/3 not. So we've made progress. We've got 2/3 more to go. But, you know, this is going to be a long, long trek, even beyond marriage equality, because we have the ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, that needs to get passed. People can lose their jobs simply because their bosses find out that they're gay or lesbian. That's not right. Their lives would be destroyed. As long as there are young people bullied to the point where they make drastic decisions about their lives, we're not done. So we've got a long ways to go yet. However, we can be optimistic because we have come a long way from the time that I was so closeted and desperately trying to protect my professional career.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was the person that made you come out of the closet. If you were here today, what would you say to him?
Well, you know, when I was doing the Howard Stern show, he got Arnold Schwarzenegger on the phone. You Howard Stern listeners, you know that. Yep. And he turned out to be an amazing Arnold Schwarzenegger fake. I mean, he got his accent, his vocal rhythm, all that. And I tried to deal with him. And then he started getting ridiculous, and I realized that my leg was being pulled.
And it happened twice.
Yes, I challenged. After that guy hung up, I challenged Howard. I told Howard, you are a guy who can command people to call in. So now I'll challenge you to get the real Arnold Schwarzenegger on the phone. Well, 2 days later, we got a telephone call. It was from Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he said, this is the real Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I launched into my spiel again. Twice burned. Shame on me. I'm not going to let it happen the third time. I'm going to see Arnold Schwarzenegger in front of me.
We have another question. Hi, go ahead, please.
Huge fan of yours, George, since Star Trek days. Star Trek was a big part of my childhood, as well as I'm sure a lot of people here in the audience. But you know, it's wonderful to see you reinvent yourself as in all the different ways that you have since the show. Do you want to talk about what your source of energy and this positivity that honestly just comes so much out of this film? I think it's really inspiring to so many people in so many different ways. You know, what are some of the sources that maybe do you think you've drawn on in your life to give you this positive energy and this tirelessness that means that Brad doesn't get to retire anytime soon?
Well, you know, life is more interesting when you take on challenges. Like when we go on our morning walk. You know, Brad wants to walk on the flat streets, but I like to go up hills because they're challenges and it makes you healthier. And life is more fun when you face challenges. And as we say on Star Trek, to boldly go where on before. Is this better, Brad? So it was a little daunting to go on the Howard Stern show, but I found a brand new friend in Howard Stern. So when when you take on challenges, you get wonderful rewards. Social media was another challenge, you know, and then by trial and error, I found the trick to it. And it's made it possible for Allegiance to break records. The 77-year record of the Old Globe Theater was broken by us. We had a sold-out run. We broke their box office and attendance record. You know, so when you boldly go where you haven't been before, you do make new discoveries and you find new challenges. Life is much more fulfilling that way.
What did you think when Leonard Nimoy was asked about Allegiance? He kind of laughs. It's like he can't get his mind around the idea that there's going to be a musical about Japanese internment. What did you think?
Japanese American.
Exactly, Japanese American.
We'll get that to be rolling off your tongue before too long. Well, you know, we always think in terms of what we've seen before, and in musical theater, it's usually happy, you know, kick up the heels, that sort of thing. But Les Miserables is about the French Revolution. Miss Saigon is about the Vietnam War. And music can be powerfully moving. And we felt that was the way to go with the internment story. It is of not only a people, but a community that was fractured. And to get the audience to share that feeling with you by a musical is the most potent way of doing it.
But Brad thinks you're not a good singer. So
I sing in the shower, don't I, Brad?
But Jennifer, when you saw the musical, what did you think of George's singing?
Well, George doesn't. You have a duet with Leia, and it was really beautiful. And then you're in the chorus the rest of the time.
Now, Leia's one of the best singers in the business, right? So you could kind of lean back and let her carry you, right?
Oh no, that was another challenge. I had to hold my own with Leia. And yes, Leia is transporting, luminous. glorious, you know, but I think I held my own, didn't you, Brad?
That qualifies as praise, Brad.
When I questioned whether George could sing in key or not, that was during the development of Allegiance before it opened world premiere at the Old Globe in San Diego. Once I saw him in San Diego, I realized that he was up to the task.
So come to New York when we open and see for yourself.
You've all been invited, ladies and gentlemen. That's pretty great.
As a matter of fact, our producer is very creative. We don't have a theater yet. We're in line for a vacancy. And so you can't sell tickets until you have a theater. But because we had a sold-out run in San Diego, he came up with the idea of selling a priority access ticket. For $5, you can get in line even before tickets go on sale to the public for a pair of tickets. And now we have almost 5,000 tickets, priority passes sold, which means that's about 10,000 seats. And so we have a great big huge leg up when we open. And that ensures a sold-out run.
So how many performances a week for a Broadway show?
8.
8 performances a week, and you're going to do that?
Of course. So I'm not going to let my understudy go on.
So wait, we're talking maybe 2 years in the future? Could it be, or could it be as soon as 1 year in the future?
This fall.
This fall.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this fall.
And do you think you have the stamina to do 8 shows a week?
Absolutely, I would. You know, Angela Lansbury is 90 years old, and every season, every year, she's on Broadway with a brand new production. And about 6 months ago, I read that she was touring with Driving Miss Daisy with James Earl Jones in Perth, Australia, of all places, the west side of Australia. And then I recently read that she's going to open on the West End in London doing Blithe Spirit. So she is amazing. And you know how old Betty White is. I'm going to top her.
Okay, who's next? Hi. Go ahead.
Jennifer, fantastic film. Thanks very much for it. George, I'm deeply impressed with your sense of optimism. As you said in the film, you consider it a blessing. Can you explore that theme more from the point of view of yourself as a child and how that sense of optimism was born? What the struggles were to develop it? Were there times you felt down and out? And a question related to that, your cohorts, the kids you grew up with, have you maintained any contact with them? And how did they fare in that process? Thank you.
When I was a child in the internment camp, I was too young and too innocent to recognize it for what it was. Up here. Always giving me orders. You know what it's like in our household. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. So it wasn't until I was a teenager that I really got to understand what the internment itself meant. But coming out of the camps was, for us, my siblings and me, the most traumatic part of the whole thing. Skid Row was terrifying. And then at school, I had a teacher who continually called me the Jap kid, or the Jap boy, which stung. But by that time, I knew that telling my parents about it would hurt them also. So I swallowed the pain and I didn't tell my parents about it. But in my discussions with my father, I realized that pessimists, and there are some Japanese Americans who say, you know, I can't make it because of the internment. Our family was wounded by it, you know, and they don't make it. They're not successes in life. They start a business and they fail because they start with that mentality of pessimism. It's terrible. The economy is bad. There are too many other people competing against me. So you won't. But if you say, I can do it, I will do it, and yes, there are going to be challenges, you will, because you feel that you're going to succeed. You're optimistic. Optimism ensures success. Pessimism is more likely to have you not making it. So that's been my philosophy in life, to approach everything with a sense of adventure and bracing for the challenge and being confident that I can solve that problem and become successful.
Why did you decide that you were going to let Jennifer and Bill get into your home, cover you as widely as they did, take intimate moments of your life, like the scattering of your mother's ashes, put them on the screen? What was it in the decision-making process that made you think this is something that I want to do?
Two things. First, we didn't know Jennifer from Jane when she approached us. And so we had to vet her to see how good a documentarian she is. And we saw her film,
It came from Kuchar.
It Came from Kuchar. And it was a wonderful film. She caught the humor, the whimsy of it, but also the discipline of these filmmakers and their drive. And so we satisfied ourselves that she's a good filmmaker. But the other part that persuaded us, Brad and I talked about it, is it's an opportunity for us as well, because our mission is to be advocates for social equality, social justice, and a film, a documentary, is a wonderful way to humanize the issues that we've been talking about. So for those two counts, we agreed to work with her. But I don't think, despite the fact that Brad and I discussed it, he was quite prepared for how exposed our lives were going to be.
More exposed than on Howard Stern, Brad?
I think it was more truthful, because I think a radio show on Sirius XM, which is paid for that material, they elevate, it's hyped a little bit more than the truth. But with Jennifer's documentary, so beautifully edited by Bill Weber, it was the truth of our relationship. And so when I watch it with an audience and I see you reacting to George and me, I'm really emotionally overwhelmed. And I thank everybody for watching the film with an open mind. You're like hundreds of people, but this is the one opportunity in our lifetime for literally millions of people to see George's story. So it's in our story, because I've been part of George's life for almost 3 decades, but it's the way this documentary will go in millions of people's homes eventually in a few months in theatrical release, and they know the distribution of it. But it's going to mean that fair-minded people all over North America will be able to think a little bit about social justice issues.
The world, not just North America.
What was it about George that made you decide that this was the film that you wanted to make?
Well, initially, I was a huge fan of George before I didn't know either of them, of course, but before I even met Brad, I was a huge fan of George's. First from Star Trek, I was a fan of the original series, loved to watch the reruns when I was growing up, and then was just really charmed and inspired by George's eloquent way of coming out in 2005 and becoming an LGBT activist for civil rights. Read his autobiography, which was mostly about his internment experience, which, of course, it makes perfect sense, but I was surprised. I'm like, I can't believe Mr. Sulu had this experience.
There's a bit about Shatner in that biography, too, though.
Well, there is. There's some Star Trek gossip, it's true. But the
Not gossip, fact.
I'm sorry. And I know. And so anyway, I couldn't believe that there wasn't a documentary about this inspiring person, and decided to reach out to him via his agent, and fortunately got in touch with them rather quickly, and Matt kind of hit it off, but talked on and off for a few months about how it would go. And I got to know Brad a little bit at that time, and I could just see the dynamics, which are very familiar to probably anyone in long-term relationships with some functional dysfunction. I think we're comfortable with that term. And so I just thought that was also really charming, and just something that they didn't hide. They were who they were. So that became an additional element that I'm so glad it did to the film, and we call it a romantic comedy, which is unusual for a documentary. And honestly, normally I don't like romantic comedy.
It's funny from the first frame of the film. It's got humor throughout, which is fitting for George as a subject matter. And both Brad and George are so naturally funny, but the rhythm of the editing and the way that the film is structured brings the jokes home every time. And I think you could tell by the way the audience responded to it tonight that every single part of the film had a punchline. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So I think, Bill, that's your work, probably, right, as an editor.
That was one of the joys about working on this film, is that I did see it as a romantic comedy in a lot of ways when I first came on, and that was one thing that attracted me. I had a film here about 3 years ago at Hotdocs, a film that I edited and co-directed called We Were Here, and it was about the AIDS crisis in San Francisco. And it was a friend of mine and I telling the story about 15,000 people in our neighborhood that died over a 15-year period, and it was really an emotional thing to do, and to come into a comedy after that was really fun. And come into a comedy that has a really nice, I really love hearing the people that get the fact that, there's a need for social justice, that there's a goal of making America and Canada and wherever you live a better place, sort of interwoven with this theme that you can laugh at yourself and have fun, and being in good relationships with your partner. They don't necessarily fit what some people think a relationship should look like or whatever. So there's a lot of layers to this, but it was really fun to work on a comedy. Yeah.
Let's go back to the audience. We have a question at the top. Hi, do we have a microphone there? Go ahead.
Hi.
Where are you?
I'm right here. Hi, George. I've been a longtime fan of Star Trek, and I wouldn't forgive myself if I hadn't asked you something. And I just want to say that someone who is an Asian Canadian and someone who is openly gay, that you're also a huge inspiration for me. You talk about social justice, and you're a very huge public figure, and you raise awareness. I didn't know that you had run for office before. My question is, would you think about running again, and what do you think would be the best avenue or avenues to advance social justice?
Well, running for public office was never on my list, and certainly not on my bucket list. It was a unique and single opportunity. I was a supporter of Mayor Tom Bradley. He was our city councilman, and when he was elected, there was that vacancy, and my political friends all came to me and said I should throw my hat in the ring for Tom's vacant seat, Tom Bradley's vacant councilmanic seat. And they said, you have name identification, you've been active in the political arena in this district, you should try. And we don't have an Asian voice there. And I also added, well, we don't have a Hollywood voice either in the LA City Council. And there's a huge constituency from the motion picture and television industry that doesn't have a voice there in the LA City Council. So I thought, well, all right, I'll give it a try. I like public service. I like working with people. So I went to Tom Bradley and I said, Tom, I've been persuaded to consider running for the city council seat, and I've told all my political friends that I will do it if you will endorse me. And he said, George, I wish you had come to me sooner. I was approached by another person when Tom decided to run for mayor, and he gave him his endorsement already, and he can't back out on that. And because of Tom's endorsement, I lost by a sliver. But what I got out of that was political credibility, that the people now know that I can get votes, although not enough votes to win.
You know, we have an election coming up here in Toronto.
You mean you'll let an American run for a Canadian office?
Japanese American.
Japanese part qualifies me to run here.
But you know,
I may consider running in Quebec.
oh yeah.
Because I have a Canadian branch to my family. My Japanese American aunt, my mother's younger sister, married an English Canadian, or Anglophone Canadian. And he passed last year, but he always got on his soapbox about the language issue. And so I said, well, you've had an election, does that settle it? And sure enough, 10 years later, you had another election on the same issue, and now there was talk of another redo of the same issue. What is his name? Palaideau?
Yeah, Pierre Carl Palaideau.
Palaideau, yeah. So, you know, you do the same thing over and over again. I will teach them that there is a purpose for an election. When that election is finished, that settles it.
I just want to go back to something that young man said, because and it's in the film as well. John Cho mentions it, and B.D. Wong mentions it, and that is just how important it was for Asian Americans to turn on the television in the 1960s and see an Asian character who had the agency that Mr. Sulu had. And you were a young man when you took that part, but did you know how important, how much of a groundbreaking role that was, not for you, but for all of the Asian people, and people of any race, that were turning on the television and watching that vision?
I'm Asian American. I recognized immediately when I had that interview with Gene Roddenberry, and he described the show and the character that he was considering me for. And so, yes, what BD said, what John Cho said, I grew up feeling the same way, and feeling, you know, ashamed for the people that were playing those stereotypical roles. And I told my father when he pointed that out to me, that, Daddy, I will change it. I will, you see, I'm going to change that image. But then, you know, the forces of Hollywood and their persuasion got me to do a couple of those roles that I was determined not to do because I was ambitious.
Is it hard for you to see them as you did tonight?
I didn't want Jennifer to include them at all, but she had to be truthful, and that is the truth of my career, and that is the nature of Hollywood. They will coerce you with dangling that, you know, next big opportunity in front of you if you do this project. So I recognized immediately when Gene Roddenberry described that role, certainly for me, but also the symbolic thing for Asian Americans and the Asian image on the media.
Good thing you didn't screw it up, huh? Jennifer, were you going to add to that?
I was just going to say, yeah, George and Brad, both of them, really didn't want this to be a vanity project, so I was just really happy that George was agreeable, because I knew that would be uncomfortable. I presume it would be uncomfortable to see your least favorite. He's done amazing, amazing things, and then, you know, we're including the two Jerry Lewis pieces, and, you know, they're brief, but yeah, no, I think it's amazing that George was okay with that. And
I was not okay, but that was the truth.
We have another question. Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi. I'm wondering, George, if you had any mixed feelings, or if you have any mixed feelings about your father signing no on the papers that ultimately led to more years and more difficult years in internment.
I'm proud of my parents for their having taken that stand. You know, thank you very much. Because it was a very American posture that they took, to not grovel before power, to take pride in who you are, and to respond to it with dignity. Because that question 28 was one sentence with two opposite ideas, and for the government to expect you to answer in any way and not incriminate yourself on the question. It's asked to, and I'm paraphrasing, but it asks, will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America and forswear your loyalty to the Emperor of Japan? We're Americans, and for the government to assume that we have an inborn, organic loyalty to the Emperor simply because we look like this was outrageous, and it was racist. And so if you said, no, I don't have a loyalty to the Emperor, which was a very honest response, you were answering no to the same part of that, the opposite part of that same question. If you answered yes, meaning I will swear my loyalty to the United States, then you were accepting the fact that you did have an existing loyalty to the Emperor. And, you know, I'm grateful to the people who answered it the way the government wanted them to answer, and went from those barbed wire prison camps to fight for this country with such courage and with such honor. They came back from the Second World War, from the European theater, as the single most decorated unit of all of the units in the Second World War. A Japanese-American unit, a segregated unit, having come from behind American barbed wire fences, who still had their families imprisoned there. But those that stood on principle and would not grovel before that government that was abusing them. They take your property and they imprison you for a year, and then they come down asking for your loyalty and challenging whether you had a loyalty to the Emperor was crazy. And for my parents that stood up and said no to that is a very American position. There were young men that answered no to that, and they said, I will serve in the military because I'm an American, but I will fight as an American, not as an internee, going from behind these barbed wire fences, leaving my family in imprisonment. I will fight for this country if I can report to my hometown draft board with my family back in our home. That is a very American posture, and I'm proud of those young men. But taking that strong, courageous, principled position, they were tried for draft evasion and sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, from an internment camp to the federal penitentiary. They paid for that principled stand with hard time in a penitentiary. We have a checkered history in this country, and that's why we all have to be engaged, sometimes holding democracy's feet to the fire to make it a better, truer democracy.
This is the imperfection of democracy. It's always a possibility in those kinds of cases. We have time, I think, for one more question from the audience, and I believe we have somebody in the. Do we have somebody in the balcony? Yes. Hi.
Yes. George, you are Asian American, and I call myself a planetary patriot.
Planetary.
I said I call myself a planetary patriot.
Are you humanoid, or are you from...
Well, come back to real life on real earth. My question to you is, I only started noticing you after you became an activist in the equality rights movement. And you have spent almost a decade at it, which is, and you have done very well. I would like to know if you would like to do another decade of activism on all those people who are interned or, say, behind the fences. Could you take that turn in the near future?
All those people that are interned behind what fences in the next decade?
You had a decade of equality rights activism, and would you like to now do some activism regarding the millions of people who are behind fences?
There are so many issues. You know, you got to focus on where you can be most effective. I am a Japanese American, and the incarceration of innocent Japanese Americans is an issue that's very close to me. I am gay, and the kind of inequality inflicted on gays, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender people is very organic to me. But you know, when you look at our global situation, there is a lot of inhumanity, outrageous situations going on. And yes, I feel like I want to address them, but can you be effective at addressing 1,000 or a dozen issues all at the same time? I don't think so. So I am selective in the issues that I get engaged with.
Plus, you're going to do 8 nights a week on Broadway, so it's not I'm
going to be busy.
George, you know, F. Scott Fitzgerald said there are no second acts in American lives. You've had, what, 14 or 15 second acts so far?
14th act. Not a second act.
No, it's the 14th. You're going on, and it's amazing. And the energy that you have, the support that you have from Brad, the wonderful filmmaking that we've seen tonight that shows it all and has shown your history as clearly as it has. And Jennifer, the filmmaking that you brought to us tonight and how much everybody enjoyed it, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I wanted to acknowledge, we have our 2 producers are here. If we could just give them a round of applause.
I would like to say, when I first heard Hotdocs, I heard hot dogs, and my mouth salivated. But now I know it's not hot dogs, it's hot docs, and I've experienced it, and now my mouth drools.